Ukraine are 2 weeks deep into their incursion into Russia. So far, Russia's response has been surprisingly quiet. Ukraine's decision to push into Russia is not just some random act of aggression, it is instead a political chess move. Ukraine's leader Zelensky said that by going onto Russian land, Ukraine could create a buffer zone, something that Russia had failed to do and wanted to do so. It pushes Russian troops back and stops them being able to fire at a distance to Ukrainian land. And unofficially, it also encourages Russia to move troops out of the east of Ukraine and back into Russia in order to defend the motherland. Putin has suggested instead that it is a move designed to create leverage during potential negotiations. Donald Trump, the USA contender for the presidential elections, has said that if he becomes president, then during Ukraine talks, the lines in which they are at the moment ought to stay the same, meaning Russia would keep about 18% of occupied Ukrainian land. Ukraine have said, fair enough, but in that case, we're going to keep some Russian land instead. By occupying some part of Russian land, Ukraine can then say, well, all right, we'll trade some of the stolen Russian land if you give back some of our stolen Ukrainian land. Still, Putin is regarded by many in Russian circles as the ultimate mafia mob boss, a keen chess player when it comes to political maneuvering. So how can a country like Ukraine have the audacity to invade Russia? Something that hasn't happened since World War II, by the way. Russia has not been invaded since then. No country has dared do it. How can Ukraine get away with it? And how can Putin be so quiet? Propaganda-wise, this is also a big loss for the Russian leader. Vladimir Putin has cosplayed as the ultimate security chief for Russia. 2 years after he justified going into Ukraine, rather than saying, we've got Ukraine and the problem has gone away, he now has to say, actually, Ukrainians are in Russia for about 2 weeks and we haven't yet got rid of them. That doesn't mean he's not doing anything. Over 100,000 citizens have been evacuated from the region in Russia, and Russia has allegedly taken 4,000 to 5,000 troops out of the east of Ukraine and back onto Russian territory in order to defend the Kursk region. But Ukraine have blown up 3 Russian bridges. They've also toppled some Russian statues and planted the Ukrainian flag on Russian land. But the bridges is an important part of that plan. It shows that Ukraine are not trying to expand onto Russian territory. Rather, they are trying to create the buffer zone that Zelensky mentioned. They're trying to cordon off that bit of Russian land so that Russians cannot come onto it easily. Putin has promised a worthy response to what he calls a terrorist incursion. But so far, very little has changed. It is surprising because about 2 years ago, Russia said they would use nuclear weapons for far less. Putin had originally threatened Western countries with being bombed by nukes if they even bothered to give weapons to Ukraine to use on Ukrainian land. The red line moved a little bit when Putin said that using Western weapons on Russian territory would be the final red line. I am not bluffing, he said. But now we've got a situation where Ukraine are using Western weapons in Russia, and so far, no nuclear detonation. I mean, we've seen British tanks, we've seen American rockets. Putin has been surprisingly quiet about it. Putin may be weighing up his response. He could nuke the Ukrainian troops on Russian land, but that would mean dropping a nuke from Russia onto Russia. The political fallout from his own people would be devastating. You see what I did there? Fallout? Anyway. Putin was also told by his best mate Xi Jinping, the leader of China, not to use nuclear weapons about a year ago. China has a vested interest in maintaining global and market security. It has taken a step back during this crisis, while giving Russia a little bit of help, but it has so far still wanted to make sure that its economic interests stay afloat. Xi Jinping is trying to keep the crisis contained because he has a lot of vested interest in the global markets. He wants China to become the leading, dominating economic power. And to do that, he has interests invested with both the US and Russia. If one of them goes down, he goes down too. China's support is also valuable for Russia as well. Russia has been sanctioned by many countries in the West, and someone needs to buy Russia's gas, right? China is one of Russia's last powerful allies. Yes, Russia has a nuclear ally with North Korea, but in terms of financial clout, Russia has no better friend than China right now. So what Xi Jinping says should go. But this delay in response may also just be Putin being Putin. When crisis happens, he tends to be quite slow on his feet. He's had the media under his wraps for a long time. I'll give you an example. Many years ago, 20 years ago, when he first came into power, a Russian submarine sunk. As Russian families were in despair, they didn't know the fate of the victims in the submarine. Putin decided to hide away from the limelight. He stayed on holiday and he didn't address the public until almost a week later. When he did meet the families, he was quite shy, he was quite nervous, and the families pretty much walked all over him with their anger and their shock about what had happened. Another example, 20 years later, when the Wagner Group marched to Moscow, when Yevgeny Prigozhin did his mutiny on Russia, Putin allegedly fled. He went into hiding, he made a brief televised appearance saying that this was very bad, and then he just disappeared. Putin does not like to tackle a crisis head on. He likes to sit back and think about what he's going to do. That can come across as strategic, but it can also come across as quite slow at times. It is also worth mentioning that after the submarine incident, Putin took vast control of the media, learning from the mistake that he had looked bad in the media, that his poll numbers had also sunk, and that in order to change that, he needed to control the media. Likewise, with the Wagner Group, 3 months after the march, Yevgeny Prigozhin fell from the sky. There's still a lot we don't know about Putin, but it does seem that he likes to take his time and think about his decisions. Ukraine ought to, in that case, make the most of their march into Russia, because Putin's response could yet still be worthy indeed.